The day Claire Harrington drove onto my land, I had grease up to my elbows and a wrench clenched between my teeth. The tractor had refused to start for the third time that week. The sun was high, the Nebraska air thick and dry, and sweat ran down my spine as I leaned into the engine. I was thinking about nothing except whether I could coax one more season out of that rusted machine and how much longer I could keep pretending I wasn't exhausted. Then I heard tires crunching on gravel. That sound alone was strange enough. People didn't just wander onto the Carter family farm. North Platte sat miles away, and anyone who came out here usually had a reason. Feed delivery, a broken fence, a neighbor in trouble. This wasn't that. I straightened slowly and wiped my hands on my jeans just as a sleek black SUV rolled to a stop near the barn. The paint reflected the sky like glass. It looked wildly out of place against the dust, the cattle, the wind-worn fences my father had built with his own hands. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She wore a tailored blazer, dark trousers, and heels that sank immediately into the soft dirt. She paused, clearly annoyed at the ground beneath her feet, then lifted her chin and kept walking anyway. That alone told me something about her. She wasn't from here, but she wasn't someone who backed down easily either. Her auburn hair was pulled neatly into a low knot, but a few loose strands had escaped, stirred by the wind. Her posture was straight, practiced, confident. And yet when she got closer, I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the strap of her bag. Her eyes were what stopped me, sharp, focused, and exhausted in a way no amount of sleep could fix. "Are you Ethan Carter?" she asked. I nodded, still holding the wrench. "That's me." She took a breath, glanced once at the open field stretching behind me, and then looked me straight in the eye. "I need a husband by tomorrow." For a second, my brain refused to process the words. The wrench slipped from my hand and hit the dirt with a dull clank. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "You need... what?" She didn't laugh, didn't flinch, didn't apologize. Instead, she opened her bag and pulled out a thick folder, holding it out to me like evidence in a trial. "If I'm not legally married by midnight tomorrow," she said, "I lose control of my company." I took the folder without meaning to. Inside were legal documents, notarized pages, highlighted clauses, a will, articles clipped from major business publications. Harrington Agricultural Group. Even I knew that name. Massive, powerful, one of the largest agricultural corporations in the Midwest. They owned land across Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas. Some of their fields bordered mine. "My grandfather founded it," she continued. "His will states that control of the company remains with a direct heir only if that heir is married by their 29th birthday. That birthday is tomorrow." "And if you're not?" I asked. "It transfers to my cousin," she said. "Ryan Harrington." I stiffened. I'd heard of Ryan. Every independent farmer in the region had. Buyouts masked as opportunities, pressure tactics, families pushed off land they'd worked for generations. The same kind of people my parents had fought before they died. I handed the folder back. "Why me?" She hesitated just for a fraction of a second. "Your farm borders ours," she said. "I looked into you. You're independent. You're not tied to corporate interests. And you're not someone who can be bought." There it was. Raw honesty. "My ex-fiancé left last week," she added quietly. "I refused to approve deals that would hurt small farmers. Ryan would undo everything my grandfather believed in." The wind rattled the fence beside us. I leaned against it, trying to steady my thoughts. "So what exactly are you asking?" I said. "A legal marriage," she replied. "On paper. Tomorrow at the courthouse. Lawyers will handle the details. Once I secure the board, we can quietly annul it." I shook my head. "I won't lie." She frowned slightly. "If I do this," I continued, "there are no fake stories, no pretending for money. And if it ever becomes real, it's because we both choose it." She studied me like she was reassessing everything she thought she knew. Then she nodded. "Deal." We shook hands right there by the barn. Her palm was cool against my rough, calloused skin. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the first crack in the quiet life I'd built to survive my grief. The next morning didn't feel real. We drove into North Platte just after sunrise. The sky was pale pink, the road empty. Claire sat in the passenger seat, hands folded tightly in her lap. Neither of us spoke much, not because it was awkward, but because the weight of what we were doing pressed down on the silence. Two strangers, a courthouse, a marriage born of necessity. The ceremony was fast. No rings, no family, just signatures and a judge who looked mildly curious but didn't ask questions. By noon, Claire Harrington was legally my wife. By evening, her legal team was already notifying the board that the will's conditions had been met. And by nightfall, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had just made the smartest decision of my life, or the one that would cost me everything. She came back the next day with 2 suitcases. "Ryan's moving fast," she said as I carried them inside. "He hired investigators. If this marriage looks fake, he'll challenge it." She needed to stay. I showed her the guest room, my parents' old room. I hadn't let anyone sleep there since the accident. Opening that door felt like opening a wound I'd carefully stitched shut. The first days were stiff and distant. I woke before dawn. She worked late into the night. We spoke in practical sentences, shared space without sharing lives, until the 3rd day. She showed up beside me at the fence wearing jeans, holding a thermos, determination written all over her face. "Mind if I help?" she asked. That was the moment things began to shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, dangerously. And neither of us realized yet that someone was watching and waiting to tear it all apart. By the end of the first week, the house no longer felt empty. It didn't feel full either. Not yet. It felt tense, like 2 lives running on parallel tracks under the same roof, careful not to collide. Claire woke later than I did. While I was already out in the fields checking irrigation lines or mending fences the wind had knocked loose, she was usually at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, her laptop open, voice low but sharp as she moved through calls with lawyers and board members. Her world spoke in numbers, clauses, and deadlines. Mine spoke in soil, weather, and broken machinery. We were polite, efficient, distant. Then the pressure found us. It started with an article. A regional business site ran a story questioning the sudden marriage of Harrington Agricultural Group's CEO to an unknown farmer from North Platte. The wording was careful, but the implication wasn't. Convenient timing, suspicious circumstances, strategic optics. By the afternoon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old classmates, distant relatives, even a reporter who somehow got my number and wanted a comment. I shut the phone off and went back to work, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of the farm. But the land felt different that day, exposed, watched. That night, Claire stood at the kitchen counter, scrolling through headlines, jaw tight. "This is Ryan," she said, "testing how far he can push." "I didn't sign up to be in the new," I replied, not accusing, just tired. She looked up at me then. Really looked. "I know," she said quietly, "and I won't let this ruin your life." I wanted to believe her. The investigators showed up 3 days later. 2 men in clean boots and pressed jackets, asking questions around town. Where did Ethan grow up? Did he know Claire before the marriage? Had anyone seen them together before last week? People talked. They always do. By the time I got home that evening, Claire was sitting on the porch steps, elbows on her knees, staring at the fields. "They're building a case," she said without looking up. "If they can prove this marriage was staged, Ryan can force an emergency board review." "And then what?" I asked. "Then I lose the company," she said, "and you get dragged into lawsuits that could bury you." I sat beside her. The porch creaked under our combined weight. "So what do we do?" She finally turned to me. "We live like this is real." That night, something shifted again. Not romance. Not yet. Commitment. She started waking up earlier, asked questions about the land, the cattle, the water rights my father had fought to protect years ago. I explained things I hadn't explained to anyone since my parents died. She listened like it mattered. On the 4th morning, she showed up at the fence wearing work gloves and jeans that were already smudged with dirt. "Show me how to fix this," she said. I expected her to quit within minutes. She didn't. She blistered her hands, punctured her finger on a wire and swore under her breath. Laughed at herself, kept going. That night she burned the eggs and we laughed harder than we had any right to. It felt Normal. Too normal. That was when the sabotage began. I found the irrigation line just after dawn, cleanly sliced, water pouring into the field, flooding young crops that hadn't had time to take root. My chest went tight. This wasn't vandalism, it was calculated. Claire stood beside me in the mud, staring at the damage. "He's escalating," she said. We reported it, filed claims, fixed what we could. But a quiet fear settled into my bones. Then came the fire. A storm rolled in late one night, wind howling, rain threatening but never quite arriving. I smelled smoke before I saw the glow. The storage shed was already burning when I reached it. Flames climbed the walls like they were alive. I grabbed a hose, then another, fighting until my arms shook. The fire department arrived too late to save most of it. Equipment, seeds, years of work reduced to ash. When it was over, I dropped to my knees in the mud, breath ragged, hands burned and raw. Claire ran to me. Inside the house, she cleaned my hands with shaking fingers. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and uncontrollable. "This is my fault," she whispered. "No," I said, gripping her wrist gently. "This is on him." She looked at me like she didn't believe that, like she was carrying the weight of everything alone. That night, neither of us slept. She stayed, didn't return to Omaha, didn't retreat behind lawyers. She used her own money to replace the damaged equipment, but she did it carefully, transparently, no strings attached. She sat beside me in insurance meetings, pushed back when adjusters tried to cut corners, and never once made me feel like I owed her. The press got uglier. They called me a pawn, a nobody farmer chasing a billionaire's shadow. They questioned my integrity, my past, my parents. It hurt more than I expected, not because of what they said about me, but because they were questioning something that had started to feel real. Claire stood in front of cameras and tied her name to mine without hesitation. She spoke about shared values, about protecting independent farmers, about why this marriage mattered. Ryan pushed harder. One evening, her phone rang and she went pale. "He forced an emergency verification hearing," she said. "A full audit of the marriage. 48 hours. If the board ruled against us, she'd lose everything, and I'd lose far more than land." That night, we sat on the porch watching fireflies flicker across the fields. "What if we lose?" she asked quietly. I didn't plan the answer. It came out before fear could stop it. This stopped being a deal for me. She turned to me, eyes wide. "I don't know when it happened," I said. "But it did." She reached for my hand. This time it wasn't for appearances. As the night closed in around us, I realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. We weren't pretending anymore, and tomorrow everything would be tested. The hearing took place 2 days later in Omaha, and it felt unreal how quiet the house was that morning. No reporters on the road yet, no investigators at the gate, just the hum of the coffee maker and the sound of boots on the floor. Claire stood by the window, dressed in a dark suit that looked sharper than anything she'd worn since arriving at the farm. She wasn't shaking anymore. Whatever fear she had left, she'd folded it away. On the drive into the city, neither of us spoke much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that mattered was already there, sitting heavy between us. When we parked, she reached for my hand, not to reassure me, to steady herself. The board meeting was held virtually, but the weight of it filled the room like a storm. Faces appeared on the screen one by one. Board members, legal counsel, and finally Ryan Harrington. He smiled the way someone smiles when they believe the outcome is already decided. He spoke first, calm, confident. He called our marriage a convenient arrangement, questioned the timing, the lack of history. He referred to me as a struggling farmer looking for an escape, and to Claire as a woman acting out of desperation. I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed silent. The board asked questions, direct ones. Why the sudden marriage? Why separate finances? Why no prenuptial celebration? Why no witnesses beyond a neighbor? Then Claire stood. She didn't deny anything. She admitted the truth, that it had started as necessity, that she had been racing against a deadline to protect her grandfather's legacy, that she had walked onto a farm with no plan beyond survival. Ryan leaned back, satisfied. Then she continued. She said somewhere between burned fields and sleepless nights, between blistered hands and quiet dinners, something changed. She said she didn't fall in love with a title or a strategy, but with a man who treated her like an equal when the world treated her like a bargaining chip. The room went still. Before Ryan could interrupt, her lawyer shared a screen. Security footage from my farm, grainy but clear enough. A figure near the storage shed the night of the fire. Audio layered beneath it. A voice giving instructions. Ryan's voice. Then bank records appeared. Payments. Shell accounts. Pressure tactics. Proof that the sabotage hadn't been coincidence, but strategy. Ryan's smile vanished. Within minutes, authorities entered his office. The hearing was suspended. When it reconvened an hour later, Ryan Harrington had been removed from consideration and placed under investigation. The board ruled the marriage valid. Claire retained control. When the call ended, she collapsed into my arms. Not gracefully, not composed, just shaking, breath caught, relief and exhaustion pouring out of her all at once. I held her there in that quiet conference room, knowing that something had ended and something else had begun. After that, the world slowed down. The press disappeared as quickly as it had come. Ryan was arrested. His allies were removed. The threat that had followed us for weeks lifted like fog burned away by morning sun. Back on the farm, the land felt different. Lighter, like it could finally breathe. Claire returned to work, but not the way she had before. She cleaned house, cut deals that hurt small farmers, redirected resources towards sustainability and transparency. She never tried to drag me into her world unless I asked. She understood that the farm was my anchor, just as the company was hers. Instead, she supported quietly. Grants for irrigation, fair supplier connections, help that respected my independence. At home, life settled into something steady and real. Mornings became shared routines. She brewed coffee while I fed the cattle. Evenings found us on the porch, watching the sky turn from blue to gold. The guest room slowly became our room without either of us announcing it. We argued sometimes, about long calls that interrupted dinner, about my stubborn refusal to ask for help. But those arguments ended in understanding, not distance. For the first time since my parents died, the house felt full. Almost a year later, near the anniversary of that courthouse wedding, we made a decision. Not because of a will, not because of a board, because we wanted to. We held the ceremony right on the farm under the wide Nebraska sky. No luxury, no pressure, just wildflowers, string lights, neighbors, and friends who had stood by us when things were hardest. Claire wore a simple white dress that moved with the wind. I wore clean boots and a nervous smile. The same judge officiated, smiling as he spoke. We wrote our own vows, honest ones, about choosing each other, about standing together through storms, about building something real. When I slipped the ring onto her finger, I realized how far we'd come. What started as desperation had become love. What began as a contract had turned into a life. Now when we sit on the porch in the evenings, fields stretching out before us, I think about that first day she drove up in her black SUV. She came asking for a husband. She stayed because we chose each other. And before we end this story, let me ask you something. Do you believe love can grow from the most unexpected beginnings? Yes or no? Did this story make you feel hope, tension, or quiet healing as it unfolded? If you enjoyed this journey, comment 100 below to let me know. Tell me which country you're watching from right now, and if this story touched you even a little, share it with someone who might need to hear it too.